Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 84, text 42, text 43, and text 44 through 45. So text 42 is the one we'll chant together. Shri Shuka Vacha Iti Tat Vajanam Shrutva Vasudevo Mahamanaha Tanrishin Vitvijo Vavre Murdnam Namya Prasadya Cha Shri Shuko Vacha Iti Tad Vachanam Shrutva Vasudevo Mahamanaha Tanrishin Ritvijo Vavre Murdnanamya Prasadya Cha Shri Shuko Vacha Iti Tad Vachanam Shrutva Vasudevo Mahamanaha Tanrishin Ritvijo Vavre Mudnam Namya Prasadya Cha. Please chant. Shri Shuko Vacha Iti Tad Vachanam Shrutva Vasudevo Mahamanaha Tanrishin Ritvijo Vavre Mudnanamya Prasadya Cha Shri Shuko Vacha Iti Tad Vachanam Shrutva Vasudevo Mahamanaha Tanrishin Ritvijo Vavre Mudananamya Prasadya Cha. Thank you very much. And the word for word, Shri Shuko Vacha. Sukadev Goswami said, Iti, thus spoken, Tat, there, Vachanam, words, Shrutva, having heard, Vasudeva, Vasudeva, Mahamanaha, generous, Tan, them, Rishin, the sages, Ritvija, as priests, Vavre, chose, Murna, with his head, Anamya, bowing down, Prasadya, gratifying them, Cha, also. And the translation for text 42 is as follows. This is a BBT translation. Sukadev Goswami said, after hearing these statements of the sages, generous Vasudev bowed his head to the ground and praising them, requested them to become his priests. And then text 43. Tainam rishayo rajan frita dharmena dharmikam tasmin ayajayan kshetre makhar uttama kalpakai. The translation for text 43. Thus requested by him, O king, the sages engaged the pious Vasudev in performing fire sacrifices at that holy place of Kurukshetra according to strict religious principles and with most excellent ritual arrangements. Text 44 through 45. Tandikshayam pavritayam Krishnaya Pushkarasrajam Snata Suvasa Sorajan Rajana Shuchva Alar Krita Tan Mahisyascha Mudita Nishka Kantha Suvasasa Diksha Shalam Upajagmur Alipta Vastu Panayaha. And the translation for text 44 through 45. When Maharaj Vasudev was about to be initiated for the sacrifice, O king, the Vrishnis came to the initiation pavilion after bathing and putting on their fine clothes and garlands of lotuses. The other kings also came, elaborately ornamented, as well as all their joyful queens who wore jeweled lockets around their necks and were also clad in fine garments. The royal wives were anointed with sandalwood paste and carried auspicious items for the worship. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupagadhamayam Didati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Gana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vajapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Pashachya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So interestingly enough, these three verses don't have commentary by the Acharyas either. So I'm approaching it a particular way. There's the sages were asked a question by Vasudev in the presence of Lord Krishna. And he was present, of course, being Vasudev's son, but now in a grown-up form. The ruler of Dwarka, along with his queens. So this was the question that was posed by the sages, or by Vasudev to the sages. Kindly tell us how the reactions of one's work can be counteracted by further work. That was the question posed. And that came from the 29th verse in the same section. So their response is given by Narada, who's the leader of the sages. And Narada, he addresses a particular concern, and that is that Vasudev may create a very awkward mood for the sages by treating Lord Krishna as, someone subordinate in a way, because he's present, Lord Krishna's present. The sages have been asked a question by Vasudev, and now there's the problem because naturally the, the sages are in the presence of Krishna and they're going to be speaking transcendental knowledge. So it's very important that a potentially embarrassing situation is circumvented. So Narada takes that responsibility. So the point is that the sages, they felt obliged to maintain their attitude of reverence towards Lord Krishna. So naturally, they couldn't ignore Lord Krishna and proceed to answer Vasudev's question. So one of the ways that Narada deals with this potentially embarrassing circumstance is, and this is how it was put in the purport to text 30, it was to remind everyone present of Sri Krishna's supremacy. So that was the way it was going to be dealt with. If everyone is reminded of Krishna's supremacy, then only can the sages speak. So that reminder of Lord Krishna's supremacy, it takes the form of a metaphor. So this is the metaphor. The ordinary conditioned human being may think that the conditioned soul, who is covered by the materialistic senses, mind, and intelligence, is equal to Krishna. But Lord Krishna is just like the sun, which although sometimes may appear to be covered, is never covered by the cloud, by snow or fog, or by other planets during an eclipse. When the eyes of less intelligent men are covered by such influences, they think the sun to be invisible. Similarly, persons who are influenced by senses addicted to material enjoyment cannot have a clear vision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a metaphor that allows one to understand the supremacy of Lord Krishna, and that persons who cannot understand are those that have senses that are addicted to material enjoyment. So such persons would have difficulty to understand. So this was a metaphor that can be found in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada. So thereafter only do the sages address Vasudev in the presence of Lord Krishna and Balaram and many other kings. So this is what they say. So this is their response to Vasudev's question. To counteract the reaction of fruitive activities and the desires impelling one to fruitive activities, one must, with faith and devotion, execute the prescribed sacrifices meant for worshipping Lord Vishnu. So that's the short answer. And of course, it's got so much in it. Because naturally, work means that there's going to be some sort of desire involved in the work. What are you doing the work for? So it becomes a fruitive activity if you're wanting some result from it, or some enjoyment from it, or so. And there's also going to be a reaction for thinking in that way. So that would be the materialistic way of doing work. And of course, there's desires that are impelling one to do work. So those are the ones that have to be examined. With which consciousness are you doing work? So the way to counteract where it's kind of some sort of um, motive that may be for one's own happiness or the reward one will get for oneself is that one has with faith and devotion to execute prescribed sacrifices meant for worshipping Lord Vishnu. So this is the answer of the sages to Vasudev's question. And Srila Vishwanath puts it this way: without understanding that fire sacrifices are meant for worshipping Lord Vishnu, it is not possible to eradicate karma. So it's absolutely critical that sacrifices are performed for Lord Vishnu, because this is going to be the way to break and wipe out karmic reaction. So that's very, very significant. And in text 42 from today, it states that Vasudev heard various statements from the sages. So hence I'm going to examine a little bit this question posed by Vasudev to the sages and their response, because Vasudev is hearing their various statements. So the reason men should offer everything in the transcendental service of the Lord, so conducting sacrifices that are worship of him, Lord Krishna, is because he's the proprietor of all planets and the demigods therein. So generally, like, we don't live in a monarchy, but in a monarchical structure, there's an understanding that the reigning monarch is, you could say, in a sense, the overseer, the provider, the caretaker of the citizens. So, in the same way, if one takes into one's consciousness that Lord Krishna actually owns every single planet in the universe, he's the one who's overseen every single planet in the universe. And whoever is actually managing a particular planet is overseen by Lord Krishna. So the mention here is of demigods. So this is given as one of the reasons why one has to think to offer everything in service to the Lord. So particularly transcendental service. So you're doing it with consciousness that is aware that one is doing it in service and in a mood of devotion to him. So Lord Krishna explains the result of such a sacrifice. And this is how Lord Krishna puts it in Bhagavad Gita 5.29. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. And here's the result: attains peace from all the pangs of material miseries. That is the result. So what an extraordinary result. Because if one is performing activities or even possibly sacrifices that are meant for the rulers of particular planets, but not for worship of Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna as the ultimate proprietor of every single planet and the overseer of every single demigod or personality in charge of a particular planet, one will still have different karmic reactions going on. So the means to eliminate that, and this is how it's put, the pangs of material miseries. There's miseries that come. So that is eliminated by performing sacrifice to Lord Krishna and Lord Vishnu. So that's Krishna himself directly telling you what is the result. Of course, alongside having the understanding that Lord Krishna is the proprietor of all planets, one also has to have the understanding or an acceptance of the fact that Lord Krishna is the master of material nature, because that's the pivotal key in the whole picture. He's the master of material nature, and material nature has stringent laws that get to be experienced by the conditioned soul. So somebody functioning in material nature, under the laws of material nature, gets to experience the effects of those laws through the activities that they perform. So it's not that activities just get performed and there's no effect, even if the effect comes a long time later. I had this very interesting experience just the other day. It was very early in the morning, and I had to withdraw some money, and I was in one of those large stores, and I heard this exchange between a shop owner a few doors down. He has a store, and the workers in the large chain store. And he was clearly a little bit upset because he had got cheated by somebody, and because he was explaining something about, or he was telling the workers in the big store, as a fellow shopkeeper or a fellow person also doing business, he was saying that, in the next time they had to get the card number of this person, and this person comes every month. So understood there was a problem. He had got cheated in some way. And the most extraordinary thing was that I was actually hearing this, and that same person had actually cheated me when I was trying to do business for many years, supposedly giving discounts and actually not giving the discount. He had some way of working his machine that it appeared as though there was a discount, but there was no discount. So I was just thinking how extraordinary it is that, there's laws in material nature. So I was getting to see that this person was now being cheated, the same person who had been cheating me. So it was an extraordinary arrangement to see that. But everyone is under the laws of material nature. So he was having to undergo similar suffering. So now Srila Vishwanath gives another perspective on the statement of Lord Krishna being the well-wisher and the benefactor of all living entities. So Krishna in fact states, this is how he puts it, you should know for certain that I am the only enjoyer of all sacrifices performed by Kami yogis and austerities performed by Jnani yogis. I am the worshipable Lord and indwelling super soul of the yogis. And he puts it, I am the friend of all living entities who gives benefit to all living beings by instructions about bhakti through the medium of my devotees. Out of my mercy, I'm the object of worship for the devotees. So this was actually Srila Vishwanath paraphrasing Krishna's statement that peace results from the pangs of material miseries when one performs sacrifices to Lord Krishna as the proprietor of all planets and the demigods therein. Srila Vishwanath puts it, paraphrases it, where he's actually saying that Krishna is saying that he's the enjoyer of all sacrifices, those performed by Kami yogis, those performed, so persons who are on the on the yogic path, but still they're looking for material benefit. The Jnani yogis, those that are actually trying to understand perhaps the scriptures through different mental haggling. Still, they're performing austerities, and still Krishna says that he's the only enjoyer of the activities that they're performing. Because if you think about it, it's a very personal thing. So he's the one who's enjoying it. So, and he says particularly that he's actually the friend of every living entity. And he gives benefit to every living entity. So this is Srila Vishwanath taking that same verse from the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that I read. And it's Krishna saying that he's actually, the way he's showing his kindness, particularly to devotees, those who are performing sacrifices with the consciousness that they're performing it for him, it's through actually giving instruction about bhakti through devotees. So that's how he explains his particular mercy. So in a similar way, Lord Krishna reinforces the performance of sacrifice to him and the prerequisite that has to be there. So naturally, you may be noticing I'm putting a lot of emphasis on sacrifice because this was the pivotal issue here between Vasudeva and the sages. So Krishna reinforces the performance of sacrifice to him, and that he says there's a prerequisite for doing the sacrifice. And this is what he says, and it's from Bhagavad Gita 17.25. Without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. So notice the interesting thing. Krishna is giving the prerequisite for how sacrifices should be performed. One shouldn't be performing a sacrifice wanting some results. So there's many sacrifices that are performed. We don't get exposed so much to it because we're in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but persons that are coming into the International Society for Krishna Consciousness may be coming from an Indian background where it's actually very common to have already be in that stream of upliftment. So going through a portion of the Vedas, the Karmakanda portion, where there actually is sacrifices being done to demigods, so the rulers of some planets, in order to actually get some material gain in their present reality. So Krishna is saying sacrifices should be done without desiring fruitive results. That's the proper way to do sacrifices. You're not looking for some result that's going to benefit you. But he says at the same time, just because you're doing the sacrifice in that way, there's a benefit that comes. And that benefit that comes is that one is going to be freed from material entanglement. So it means you're not going to be performing activities that are going to create your next body, and you're going to have to suffer reactions, but rather you're getting freed from material nature. You're getting freed from that entanglement or the ways you're driven to act. That will actually start to subside. So the necessity of not performing acts for material gain is emphasized. But acts that are performed for the ultimate gain of being transferred to the spiritual kingdom and to get free from material entanglement, that's the emphasis of how sacrifices should be performed. And this brings us to another statement heard by Vasudeva from the sages, because that was text 42. He's hearing statements from the sages. And that is, it's a statement that breaks down this material entanglement. And it stems from material desires. So this is how it's put. And this is Srila Prabhupada speaking on this section. So here's a breakdown of what material entanglement is from Srila Prabhupada. All conditioned souls within the material world have deep-rooted desires to lord it over the resources of material nature. Everyone wants to accumulate riches. Everyone wants to enjoy life to the greatest extent. Everyone wants a wife, home, and children. And everyone wants to become happy in this world. and be elevated to the heavenly planets in the next life. But these desires are the cause of one's material bondage. Imagine. It seems so natural to actually want a life where you've got more wealth, or a life where you've got a happy home life. You want a life where your future is going to be in a higher heavenly planet. But having those desires is precisely what is the cause of one's material bondage. That's Srila Prabhupada writing. So this is these deep-rooted desires and Srila Prabhupada is generalizing, everyone has them. And also this desire to lord it over the resources of material nature. You see this so commonly. The picture that always springs to my mind when I read this, lorded over the material nature, is traveling long ago with my spiritual master, Sabal, and I, and we're passing a cement factory. And he was commenting that, the persons see that mountain as belonging to them. The cement factory people, and now they're crushing it, basically. So that's lording it over material nature. Now, the antidote is given by the sages to counteract these material desires. So something that seems so natural, that wanting of happiness, happy family life, greater wealth, getting resources. There's an antidote to that, and it's given by the sages to counteract these material desires. And it's given in text 38, where they say, so I'm going into all of this because Vasudev is hearing what the sages are saying, and this is what they say. An intelligent person should learn to renounce the desire for wealth by performing sacrifices and acts of charity. So that's the means. He should learn to renounce his desire for wife and children by experiencing family life. So that's one you don't avoid. You actually go through it. And he should learn to renounce his desire for promotion to a higher planet in his next life, Saintly Vasudev, by studying the effects of time. So why don't you take a step back and look at what the effects of time are? So you actually see the deterioration and disintegration of everything, whether it's body, whether it's resources. Over time, things disintegrate or deteriorate. I had this experience recently. I was sitting on my stool that I sit for working, and the stool was put together by a Japanese carpenter in New York City, 34 years ago. And blam, I was on the floor. So the glue had worn out. So 34 years later, the very valuable material object, it deteriorates over time. The glue had worn out. So it had completely disassembled. So, so self-control, so this is continuing what the sages are saying, and they're saying self-controlled sages who have thus renounced their attachment to household life go to the forest to perform austerities. So they're giving the antidote to all those material desires that keep one tangled up in material functioning. So the process to counteract all sorts of material desires is to engage oneself in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu. And that is Srila Prabhupada generalizing the sage's statement. So they've done a breakdown where they're just saying, you learn to renounce your desire for wealth by performing sacrifice and acts of charity. You learn to renounce your desire for a happy family life by going through it. And you learn to renounce the desire for being promoted to a higher planet by observing the time causing deterioration of everything. So Uh, so ultimately, the generalization is that one has to engage oneself in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu to counteract all sorts of material desires. That's the generalization that Srila Prabhupada makes of this breakdown of the sages. So the final reason is given by the sages for the necessity of sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. Everyone, even if born in a higher status as a Kshatriya, as a Brahmana, or a Vaishya, so it means within the Vedic system, you've got your particular social designation, because there are persons that may fall below that. So it's considered a higher status to have a social designation where it's understood what your particular role is in society, what your abilities are. So Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. So it doesn't matter. Even if you have that, you still are indebted to the demigods, to the sages, to the forefathers. There's a debt that you have just by taking birth, even if it's within one of those social categories with a clearly demarked set of functions you have to perform in society. You're bringing a debt with you when you take birth. And that debt is to the rulers of the various planets, to the sages, to the forefathers, and to other living entities. So because, you've had a previous life, so you're bringing debts. And for this reason, here's another reason the sages say why you have to perform sacrifices. You have to liquidate all these debts. And so the way to liquidate the debts, here again, it's sacrifice again. One has to perform sacrifice, study the Vedic literature, so that's an act of sacrifice, generate children, that's an act of sacrifice, in regulated householder life. So the sages add, if one leaves the body without first liquidating these debts, by performing sacrifice, studying the scriptures, and begetting children, he will fall down into a hellish condition. So notice, you have to actually perform acts of sacrifice and charity. You have to study the scriptures. You have to beget children. Otherwise, you fall into a hellish condition because you haven't liquidated the debts from the previous lives. So that was the sages speaking in 39. So this is everything that Vasudeva is hearing from the sages on this topic, where they're elaborating in response to his question, and they're speaking about sacrifice. So in addition, they say, having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. So these are all means that are accepted as ways of sacrifice. And Srila Prabhupada explains the different categories of sacrifice. So this is how Srila Prabhupada explains it. You can have sacrifice of your possessions, which may take the form of various charities. So, for example, he mentions in India, there may be wealthy mercantile people, so business people. They open up dharmashalas. I'm reading just Srila Prabhupada's terms. Anashetras, atiti salas, vidya pitas. So various organized places where actually you take care of certain sections of the population. So it might be like in Vrindavan, there may be a place where widows are taken care of, or and it's a similar thing in the West. We may have charitable organizations that provide food stuff to persons that are poverty stricken, or there may be hospitals that are built that have a charitable function for persons that may need services that are extremely expensive. So you get a similar kind of thing happening. So these are sacrifices where one is sacrificing one's possessions. So wealthy persons who invest or give portions of their monetary income to set up such organizations and maintain them. Now, austerities are a different category of sacrifice. So there may be, it means that you're conducting your life under very strict rules. So this is a kind of sacrifice. So for instance, during the Chaturmasya, so July through October, someone may not shave for 4 months. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur performed that kind of sacrifice. So undergoing an austerity. Or one may not eat twice a day. That's maybe conducting one's life under very strict conditions or rules. So that's a sacrifice. And these are called tapamaya yagya. That's a term given by Srila Prabhupada, another kind of sacrifice. And then there may be the sacrifice for mystic perfection. So, for example, persons may follow the Patanjali system for merging into the absolute existence of the absolute. So the Patanjali system is more impersonal. So it's also a sacrifice to perform Ashtanga Yoga with that purpose in mind. And finally, there's the Vadhivaya Yagya, or sacrifice, which is engaging in scriptural study. So these, you could say, these are all yogis who've undertaken sacrifice, because it means that you're doing something for a higher purpose. And the yogis are all seeking a higher status of life. But this is different from Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is direct service to Lord Krishna. So you may perform those same sacrifices, but you're doing it with the consciousness that it's for Krishna. It's not actually with some material benefit in mind, whether that material benefit is even subtle, like wanting to go to a heavenly planet. That's still a materialistic activity. So Krishna, some action or some sacrifice in Krishna consciousness, which is just done in direct service to Lord Krishna, is not attained by doing any of these sacrifices that I just listed for you. You don't actually get Krishna consciousness if you perform these sacrifices in this kind of way, with this kind of materialistic mentality. It's obtained only, so Krishna consciousness or transcendental sacrifice is obtained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. It's an activity that is transcendental to material nature. So it's very special. It's direct mercy from that proprietor of all the planets. So very extraordinary. Now, Srila Prabhupada describes, so this is going back to our verses again. So looking at the 3 verses we've read together with no purport, I'm just drawing how Srila Prabhupada paints this picture of where we've come to. So this is Srila Prabhupada from Krishna book. Saintly Vasudev, after hearing all the sages, because I've been going at length what he's hearing from the sages, offered his respectful obeisances unto their lotus feet. So observing proper etiquette. In this way, he pleased the sages, and then he requested them to perform the yagyas. So that's what he did. After hearing, he said, please perform the yagya. Just natural. You know, an intelligent person, they apply what they've heard. And that's what Vasudev does. So these 3 verses, it's his application of what he's been hearing. So when the sages were selected as priests for the yagya, so that's what he's done. Please be the priest for the yagya. They in turn induce Vasudev to collect the required paraphernalia. So then they give instruction to him to how he can be a participant in the yagya, collect the various paraphernalia required. And when Vasudev was thus persuaded, this is Srila Prabhupada talking, to start to perform the yagya, all the members of the Yadu dynasty took their baths, dressed themselves very nicely, decorated themselves, and beautifully garlanded themselves with lotus flowers. So everybody immediately took up, this is going to be a sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. It's going to actually counteract any fruitive activities that may have been performed, which have created karma. So it's actually going to break that karmic bond. So everybody joins in. And the way to do it, how they did it, was to be beautifully dressed, beautifully decorated, freshly bathed. And Vasudev, dressed with nice garments and ornaments and golden necklaces, approached the area of sacrifice, carrying in their hands the queens of Vasudev. They came to the area of sacrifice, carrying in their hands the required articles to offer in the sacrifice. So that was the result of Vasudev hearing what the sages had to say. So this, of course, is sacrifice as delineated by the sages. It's sacrifice to the Lord of sacrifice. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8.4, the Supreme Lord represented as super soul in the heart of every embodied being is called Adi Yagya. So he's the Lord of sacrifice. So in this verse, the Lord stresses that he's not different from Paramatma. This is Bhagavad Gita 8.4. So the super soul gives the individual soul that opportunity to act freely and witnesses the activity. And in this case, super soul is going to nullify the reaction to fruitive activities and the desire for those activities, while simultaneously connecting one to himself, the Lord, through a transcendental action. So it's a completely different kind of sacrifice, and it's in line with what the sages said. So that's the breakdown of these 3 verses today. If there's any thoughts to add to the discussion.
There's few things I thought I'd go through. One of them is the statement that is there in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, and you mentioned it, that one have to give up the desire for result, or to have a motivation for a result, and that have to be given up. And I, you know, it's specified what type of result one have to give up, which is a fruitive result. And but the fact that to have the desire for Krishna satisfaction, that in itself is a result. One wants to offer something nice. So, so the pursuit to have something resulting out of your work is not bad if that result is for the benefit, for the happiness of Krishna. But if it's for the purpose of my sense gratification, then yes, that have to be given up. I think that's one verse in the Bhagavatam, chapter first canto, chapter 2, that says that work have to be done for the satisfaction of Krishna, not for sense gratification. So, so then result is okay as long as it's. So one should desire the result of giving satisfaction to Krishna with one work. So that's one thing that I thought, is is an important thing to understand. Um, I thought you brought out Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation of what is how the mercy or the benefit, the benefit you mentioned as the benefit that one's received by doing sacrifice is that not only one becomes free from the reactions, but actually Krishna gives his mercy through the devotees giving instruction on how to carry on one's, one's life or one's activities. So that very interconnectedness that is there with yourself understanding the process of sacrifice and applying the process of sacrifice and the relationship that is there with Krishna's representative. So it's not you directly to the Lord, but it's through the devotees that you receive not only the instructions but the benefits. I thought it was quite profound. And one of the questions that I have is one of the things that is pointed out in the pastime is like Narada Muni trying to make sure to few things to alleviate the awkward situation of the sages having to address the question of Vasudev in terms of fruitive reactions, which is, obviously he's beyond that. And but having to address that question for the benefit of people, but with Krishna's presence, which is, they all understand Krishna's position. So Narada Muni, it is explained that he makes sure to establish Krishna's position before the whole thing starts. But nevertheless, they went through an explanation of sacrifices as the means to eradicate all reactions, sacrifices for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. And with Krishna's presence there, so I wonder how the the whole thing was solved in terms of the instructions and then the subsequent performance of sacrifices as requested by Vasudeva with Krishna present there. You know, when they were performing the Rajasuya sacrifice, they did the whole thing, and at the end, Maharaj Yudhishthira established Krishna as the supreme benefactor of the whole sacrifice. And so in this case, I wonder how that whole thing got solved. Uh, the directions of the sages of doing worship for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu and then performing sacrifices for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu in Kurukshetra and with Krishna's presence there, how that was also.
Yes, uh, in the case of Maharaj Yudhisthira, uh, he specifically had the intention to demonstrate to all the kings present the supreme position of Lord Krishna. So that was part of his, you could say, the results he wanted to establish the supremacy of Krishna in performing the major sacrifice that he performed. And in this particular case, it's more a kind of respect to the sages and pleasing the sages on the part of Vasudev. I mean, he was also in the royal order to actually carry out the very instruction they're giving, because sacrifice was part of the uh, auspiciousness that was already present through the eclipse at Kurukshetra. So naturally, it required an external form of sacrifice as part of the proceedings, where everybody had congregated at Kurukshetra at the time of the solar eclipse. It had been a highly auspicious occasion. So there's something extremely wonderful that is done with such intelligence, that there's an exchange between Vasudev and the sages that clarifies what the purpose of sacrifice is. And so it's like when one's equipped with knowledge and approaching a very important sacrifice, it just gives so much more benefit. So to me, it seems a very extraordinary arrangement that it was done through this verbal exchange that took place. And your question had to do with Lord Krishna being present and at the time of this, at the culmination of this exchange where a sacrifice is being performed for his pleasure. So I don't see any difficulty. Krishna's transcendental personality, and he himself is actually stating that the performance of such sacrifice brings peace from the pangs of material existence. And that is what the sages were promoting too, that sacrifice has to be done to Lord Vishnu. So it seems just a very perfect arrangement. The exchange, everybody benefits from it. The actual course of action being indicated, being sacrifice. It's in this highly auspicious moment at the time of the solar eclipse at Kurukshetra, and everyone engages. And the description from these verses was they actually getting themselves bathed and properly attired and proceeding with this incredible sacrifice for the pleasure of Lord Krishna and Lord Vishnu. So it just seems such a perfect, completely perfect scenario. That's how I'm understanding it. But thank you very much that you brought up that nice recall of Maharaj Yudhishthira's sacrifice, and just remembering that, and of course the difference situation in that setting and in this setting. But the perfection of that situation and the perfection of this situation is there through Lord Krishna's presence and through the action being performed being for his satisfaction and for and the understanding that the mercy then, it's his mercy that will be coming to everyone through the instruction. And in this case, the sages were in fact that mouthpiece for his instructions, because it completely mirrors his instructions in Bhagavad Gita that I was trying to highlight. But thank you so much for your adding to the discussion. It's very much appreciated. So Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.